quick video here on ashwagandha and holy basil. And so in these videos, I'm just going to feature a little bit about each herb. It's not like we're going to spend an hour talking about each herb. And just to let you know, part of it is because I want to summarize some information for you, but also not overload you. There's no way that an hour of information on each herb is going to be effective for you at this stage of the game. I want you to be introduced to these herbs so you have like some passing familiarity with them. I can highlight some of the things that modern science has shown supported with these herbs. But there's no way that you are going to remember all of those things, and it doesn't make sense that you're required to at this stage of the game for you. Now, if you wanted to go further on and become more of an herbalist or even be certified as a master herbalist, of course, you're going to have to know a number of herbs much, much better. But I think it's perfectly adequate for you to see what's out there, get a sense of how they affect the psychology of the brain, mood, memory, those sorts of variables that we had talked about. And so the herb videos will be not so huge, okay? And you're not required to memorize this information. You can look it up. As you get to know individual herbs, you really need to sort of just spend some time with the herb and get to know it for a while before you move on to the next herb. There's no way you can do that in any effective way at all in 6 weeks, no matter how much you study. And so asking you to memorize all these things makes zero sense. It's just not effective learning. So I want you to recognize them, kind of get a sense of what they're like, appreciate them, and see how they fit into the overall idea for the day. Like today's idea is adaptogens. All right, so ashwagandha and holy basil are both adaptogens, as are a number of other plants, some of whom we'll talk about this week. But today, ashwagandha. And so here is the botanical name, Withania somnifera. And what you want to do, as I've mentioned before, is always be familiar with the botanical name. You can always just Google that, but just knowing that if you search for ashwagandha, you may have fewer hits than if you search for ashwagandha or Withania somnifera. It's the same family as tomatoes. They kind of look like little tomatillos with a little papery husk around the fruit. The fruit is really not used. And it's funny to look online. You can see some people saying, oh, the fruit, and other people are saying, oh, inedible, just never use it. So, if you want to play with the fruit, I suppose, but it's the root that we use in herbalism. The root is where the medicinal action primarily is. You may have some in the berries, but you also have some in blueberries, right? So we use the root. The legend of ashwagandha, and actually the meaning of the word, is horse pea or stallion. Like it makes you strong as a stallion, and it smells like horse pea. I've had ashwagandha tincture. They are not delicious. Just put it that way. Not delicious. This is something I do take pretty regularly in a pill form, not in a tincture. So it's a very, very important herb in India. They call it the king of herbs in Ayurvedic medicine. But as you'll see, a lot of these adaptogens have names like this. The king of herbs, the queen of this, because they're so important, and because medicinal traditions often incorporate adaptogens the most. Okay, so here are some of the modern findings. Ashwagandha is great for reducing anxiety. Now, all of the adaptogens will help reduce anxiety. All of them will. All of them will help reduce depression, every single one of them. They can have an overall calming effect, all of the adaptogens, not just ashwagandha. But ashwagandha, among the adaptogens, has a particularly calming effect. And so if being calmer is an important part of what you're trying to do, ashwagandha is definitely something to look at. because of the adaptogens. It is one that is on the much more calming side, and it's been shown in in studies to actually literally reduce cortisol levels. And so, as we know, stress increases cortisol levels. And so ashwagandha can be a really nice help in terms of mitigating the impact of stress. It protects the heart, protects the thyroid, immune system, and brain. Again, all adaptogens have impacts on the immune system, all of them. It will help regulate thyroid and can even a little bit stimulate the thyroid, but sorry. But in that stimulation, don't read that as, oh my gosh, I can't take it because it will stimulate my thyroid. Remember, with adaptogens, you're looking at an effect of normalizing. So a normalizing, if you remember, a normalizing effect is really about bringing things back into homeostasis. So I'm just going to keep reminding you that although it says it can stimulate the thyroid, that doesn't mean in every single situation it's like a drug that just simply stimulates the thyroid. What it really does is normalizes. And so in cases where your thyroid needs help, it can help your thyroid, but it is not in keeping with the understanding of this multi-directional and normalizing influence of adaptogens to believe that just because it does one thing, it means it will do that one thing in every single context. So keep that in mind. I'll bring it up again in other, as we talk about other plants. Like most plants, and certainly like most of the ones that we talk about, it is antibacterial, antifungal. Most plants do have these effects. And the reason is, in order for plants to survive, they have to produce chemicals that ward off or protect them from the effects of bacteria and fungi. So most plants will be antibacterial and antifungal as a function of, did they survive? So again, remember, this is a secondary metabolite here that is, or secondary metabolites that are responsible for these antibacterial and antifungal actions. They are part of what helped the plant survive. And so it only makes sense that most plants would have some antibacterial and antifungal properties, since that's how they survive. So then when we ingest that plant, those antibacterial and antifungal chemicals also help us and can be used in our bodies to fight bacteria and fungi and viruses also. So similarly, almost every green plant there is anti-inflammatory. This is something that you'll see. I'll keep listing it, but honestly, it's like every single plant is anti-inflammatory. If you just eat plants, you're eating a much more anti-inflammatory diet. Eating plants has a lot of power. Antioxidant also. Most plants have antioxidants. Some plants are very strongly anti-inflammatory or very strongly antioxidant in their nature. And certainly ashwagandha and many of the other adaptogens are maybe a little more anti-inflammatory and antioxidant than your basic, plant, any green plant out there. But again, remembering that plants all have secondary metabolites and they all help the plant grow and thrive and survive. So they're going to have these qualities. And so if you eat them, then you can take advantage of those qualities too, not just how many calories, right? Or how much vitamin C. It's much, much more than that. Ashwagandha is considered, in addition to being an adaptogen, it's considered to be a nervine. And so a nervine is a category, again, that is more of an herbalist vocabulary than in the mainstream medical field. A nervine means that it helps support and protect the nervous system. Ashwagandha is considered to be a nervine because it can help with memory and cognition, and it can protect the brain, etc. Also helps with rheumatoid arthritis. And you can see, since it's an anti-inflammatory, certainly any anti-inflammatory will help with inflammatory conditions. It will help with RA because it is a pretty potent anti-inflammatory. There's this thing called heme oxygenase 1. This is an enzyme. This enzyme helps you dispose of heme in your body. Now, heme is this little carrier of iron that makes red meat that red color. It's the ingredient in the mystery meat or that magic meat that people are making out of plants that helps it taste more meaty. Heme usually is attached to hemoglobin. And so hemoglobin helps carry oxygen to the cells with iron. But sometimes heme gets unattached. And that usually happens through trauma. Now, normally, you have a little bit of free-floating heme that is running around. It is damaging cells that sort of normally happens. And then the body comes around and recycles it and makes it so it's not really an issue. Cell damage happens. You have cells that oxidize. This happens. This actually can be useful because when cells oxidize, they can help kill problems, bacteria or viruses, etc. And so it's not like it's 100% bad, but the body has methods to keep it under control. However, under the effects of trauma, then, and I'm speaking more physiological trauma, but psychological trauma can have similar effects. So physiological trauma, normally you've got this kind of little system where whatever free-floating heme is around, the body recycles it, it limits the damage, it's not a problem. Heme overwhelms the recycling ability of the body after trauma because there's so much more heme that is dislodged from hemoglobin. It's sort of like knocked loose, and now you've got this huge amount of heme going around damaging cells, and so it can be a problem. And so this enzyme is part of what helps dispose of this heme that's been free-floating and dislodged. So the deal with ashwagandha is this. When the liver is under stress, then ashwagandha can increase the enzyme here. It increases the release of this enzyme when the liver is under stress. So you can see sort of the adaptogenic effect here. Adaptogens help protect the body from the impact of stress. One of those impacts of stress is that you have more heme floating around and the body's a little overwhelmed and not able to recycle it as effectively. Ashwagandha comes in, and one specific thing that it can do is help increase or potentiate the release of this particular enzyme in the liver so that heme can be disposed of better. So that's kind of one little snapshot into how an adaptogen can work in a specific manner. Ashwagandha has been shown to reduce anxiety, reducing brain concentrations of tribulin, which is an endogenous drug endocrine, which is a marker that people use to identify, yes, there's clinical anxiety happening in your brain. The reduced brain concentrations of this endocrine are similar to what would happen if you took lorazepam, which is a benzodiazepine that is on the market. Study of 130 adults. This is a study from India. They're given either a placebo or ashwagandha for a year. And you can see the results looking at their stress, somatic anxiety, insomnia, somatic functioning rather, social dysfunction, severe depression, and their serum cortisol. So in the people who got ashwagandha, their serum cortisol was reduced 28%. And the people who got a placebo after a year, their serum cortisol was reduced 8%. Now, these were not necessarily adults who had had trauma. It would be very interesting to see the impact of trauma adults and placebo or ashwagandha for a year. Wouldn't that be fun? A crossover study shows a lower blood pressure. So when people were taking ashwagandha, they had lower blood pressure. When they were not taking ashwagandha, they did not have their blood pressure as low. Helps blood sugar levels decline, so it's protective against diabetes, like a lot of plants. Again, there's not just like 3 plants out there. I remember when and maybe I said this before, when I very first started off looking into herbs, I was like, oh my gosh, look, it's a plant that's an antidepressant. Wow, that's so unusual. It's amazing. Oh, look, it's a plant that's anti-inflammatory. And now that I've been doing this for decades, I'm like, okay, yeah. Very common to decrease blood sugar levels, very common anti-inflammatory. It's pretty common to have plants that decrease depression and lower anxiety. And all of this is really about getting better nutrition to the body so the body can function more effectively. And a functioning good body tends to feel healthier, and you have less anxiety and less depression. Cholesterol also. Cholesterol in and of itself is not a problem. Cholesterol is critical for your body to function. You need cholesterol. And in fact, there's a study that shows that after the age of 65, every single, let me put it a different way. After the age of 65, anyone with lower than 200 cholesterol dies more frequently than people with higher cholesterol levels. So kind of interesting there. Cholesterol is very protective. Cholesterol really is the way the body heals damage. And so if you have damage in the body, like say inflammation, then cholesterol is what goes to help repair that damage. And so if you see high levels of cholesterol, it's not because cholesterol in and of itself is a problem. It's because there's a lot of inflammation. And so the body is sending a lot of cholesterol to help mitigate the damage. You can think of cholesterol kind of like firefighters. If there's a lot of fire in the neighborhood, you need a lot of firefighters to go fight the fire. And getting rid of cholesterol is sort of like saying, oh my gosh, look at all those firefighters. Let's get rid of them. Let's just get rid of the firefighters. But it's the inflammation that's the issue. And so you need cholesterol. So if cholesterol is decreased, it's not because the cholesterol was the problem. It's because the reason for needing cholesterol decreased. In other words, that anti-inflammatory effect. Okay, and then fatigue. This study talked about fatigue after chemotherapy was decreased, plus the people on ashwagandha had better appetite, less insomnia, less pain, less constipation, and a better quality of life. So that's pretty great too. All right, holy basil. Holy basil, Batman. I can't stop saying it that way. All right, there's the Latin name. This, you see these things again, like I said, king of herbs. Holy basil might be the most revered herb ever, but there is some competition. It's also known as Tulsi. So you may see this in the grocery store in the tea section. You walk by and you're looking and it says Tulsi tea. Well, what's Tulsi tea? Well, it's the same thing as holy basil. It is a member of the mint family. Mint family is known for having square stems. And so if you run across mint and you're thinking, what are you even talking about, a square stem? That's just weird. You actually probably easily can walk outside and find some purple dead nettle. Purple dead nettle, it actually doesn't look really dissimilar from this holy basil, but it has a square stem. So that might be something that's around where you live that you could find to marvel at how freaky it is that a plant will have a square stem. Go check it out. Anyway, holy basil, not like the basil that you put in your cooking. So if you're going to make pesto or you're going to make that lovely salad with mozzarella and tomato and basil, you wouldn't use holy basil. You would use sweet basil. Modern evidence for holy basil. It's effective against diabetes, again, for similar reasons, remembering that it's not like a drug where it goes, oh, let's fight diabetes. What happens is when the body is more healthy, then the body returns to more health, right? And so blood sugar being lowered is an indicator of better body health. Hypertension, so that's high blood pressure. Effective against bronchitis. Holy basil is kind of known particularly for its help in the gut. It really helps soothe the gut. It's also very soothing overall. It's a calming, again, all adaptogens are calming. Holy basil is fairly calming. Antimicrobial properties, and again, anti-inflammatory. It's considered, like all adaptogens, it is an immune modulator. And so I'm highlighting ashwagandha and holy basil, but honestly, all adaptogens share many, many, many of these things. And so they're sort of a representative couple plants of the whole. You can bet that if you take an adaptogen, it will be anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, and it will be an immune modulator as well as helping calm from stress. So when I say modulator, I want to be very clear that this is not the same thing as an immune stimulant. So a lot of times, again, we get stuck in our Western mentality of thinking things only go in one direction. They only go up or they only go down, and that the human body and plants are that simple. And that's not the case. So holy basil is an immune modulator, so it can strengthen the immune system. A strong immune system is not the same thing as a boosted or overreactive immune system. It's an immune system that can then respond to what is needed. And so when we talk about balance, what we're talking about is the ability to respond as needed. We're not talking about 50-50. That just makes no sense at all. And so if I said, a balanced nervous system, this is something that really bothered me for years, because these terms were like flying around this world and people will use them without knowing what they mean. And they'll say, oh, it helps balance your nervous system. And you say, well, what does that mean? And then they're like, well, you're balanced. What does that mean? They don't really know what it means to have a balanced immune system or a balanced nervous system. What it really means is that you are able to move back and forth to where you need to be. If you need to have a stronger immune response because you have a virus, then your immune system can do that. If you need to calm down an immune response because you're dealing with something that might be an allergen, but you don't want to have an allergic reaction, then your immune system can manage it. It can deal with it without overreacting. That's what I mean by a balanced immune system. Or a balanced nervous system is one where you can move in and out of the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic nervous system. You can move back and forth as needed. You don't ever spend 50% of time in those systems. It doesn't make any sense. Your life happens and then you respond to your life. And a balanced nervous system will help you have the strength to be able to respond as needed. Effective in liver, hepatic is liver injury, and in stomach, gastric ulcers. It can help heal those, helping your liver, preventing oxidative stress. Like I said, healing gastric ulcers. Protects against brain damage that's caused by reduced circulation. So here in this study, what they did was they made sure, I think it was an animal study. Well, of course it had to have been an animal study. They had some animals preloaded with holy basil, and then they subjected them to reduced circulation. And the animals that had the holy basil had a brain that was protected against damage, the damage that would have been caused by reduced circulation. Protects against the effects of ionizing radiation, can prevent increased cortisol levels under stress, inhibit allergy symptoms, useful for decreasing brain fog, and as an antidepressant. Again, when your body is healthier, everything is healthier. So that is it for today with holy basil and ashwagandha. I'll check in with you tomorrow. Have a great day.